Hello and welcome. Have you ever wondered how the government agencies calculate inflation? If this is something that intrigues you, then in this video we will learn in detail exactly how the federal agencies calculate CPI or Consumer Price Index, which is nothing but the technical term for inflation. In addition to inflation, you might have also heard the terms core inflation and wholesale price inflation. These terms often sound very intimidating, but in this video we will simplify and learn how inflation is different from core inflation and wholesale price inflation. My name is Kanak and welcome back to my channel. If you find this video helpful, then show your support by liking and subscribing to the channel. Inflation, which is technically known as CPI or Consumer Price Index, is a year-on-year measure of retail price increase for a defined basket of consumer items. Or in very simple terms, it measures the increase in cost of living compared to the previous year. Let us understand through a very simple example. If the cost of living for an average person in January of 2021 was $100, and if the CPI or Consumer Price Index in January of next year, that is January of 2022, was 10%, then the average cost of living in January of 2022 increased by 10% to $110 from January of previous year. Now let us look at what items are included in the measurement of inflation and what are the weights assigned to each of those items. As you can see on your screen, CPI includes a wide variety of items that are essential to the survival of an average individual, such as housing, food, gasoline, medical, education, transportation, clothing, and so on. Shelter or housing forms the largest share at almost 33% of total CPI. And it makes sense for housing to occupy the largest share in CPI because the biggest expenditure for most people is the rent or the house mortgage that they pay. Food has the second largest share at almost 14%. Thereafter, transportation has third largest share at almost 8%, followed by energy and medical services around 7%. The way CPI is designed is to reflect the actual cost of living for an average person. So, if housing prices go up, the CPI would have the largest increase, and similarly, it will also have the largest impact on consumers. Now let us talk about who collects the data and how the data is collected. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is the federal agency that collects all the data for the US economy and compiles the metrics that are then used by central bank and other agencies to make decisions. In order to measure CPI, the Bureau of Labor Statistics actually collects data from 8,000 housing units, 23,000 retailers, service providers, and online outlets in 75 urban areas around the country. Data on rents is gathered from some 50,000 landlords and tenants. Once the data is collected, the CPI is estimated based on weights assigned to each item in the basket. Now let us talk about the difference between core inflation and inflation. Core inflation excludes highly volatile items, that is food and energy, in the calculation. As you can see on your screen, the red line shows CPI, whereas the blue line, which is less volatile, shows the core inflation that excludes food and energy. Now, the first reason for excluding food and energy from core inflation because the price fluctuation in food and oil prices is due to things such as environmental or political events, which do not necessarily are a result of supply and demand in the economy. Secondly, the supply shocks of food and oil are temporary and the effects are visible on inflation immediately. As you can see on your screen, when food and oil are excluded from the red line, the blue line shows a smooth curve, which is representation of the actual forces of demand and supply in the economy. Now let us understand the difference between wholesale price inflation and retail inflation, which is simply called inflation. Wholesale price inflation measures the price increase at the source of production, that is, price increase at manufacturer, before the prices reach the retail consumer. On the other hand, retail inflation measures the price increase at retail point, from where the consumer consumes. Wholesale price inflation does not measure the price change of wholesaler or any other middleman in the supply chain. Wholesale inflation only measures the price change at the source of production, and WPI was previously known as Producer Price Index or PPI. That's all for this video, and if you find this video helpful, then show your support by liking and subscribing to the channel.